eMargin is a program that I found because I went looking, I suppose I went Googling. I was looking for a social annotation program that could be used in the classroom. It's been an emerging opportunity for groups to mark up the same text if they subscribe using some password under one or another corporate banner. And I was curious how this worked, and I found a site called eMargin in the UK that had developed this in an open source way without any proprietary requirement. And at the first pass, they had a standard requirement that you have to distribute passwords. And I thought this was nice, but not quite what you want, because the students are already busy enough with password access at the university, and adding another layer of passwords is not good. So I wrote and got a good answer from the guy who will be speaking for a few minutes, advertising the merits of eMargin. What I asked is, can you incorporate this in Moodle? And he said, not yet, but we just got a grant to put it in any virtual learning environment. Give us a year. So years pass, and I wrote back, and yes, they have it, it's ready to go. So I asked to use it, and I used it in 2 classes last semester. Now, it says click here or something like that. You never know. You never know with technology what will happen next, but I'll click and see. Well, I will not rely, but I'll tell you that he gives a good 3.5-minute spiel. There is an annoying soundtrack, which we're not hearing. I think this is good, but it's a very thoughtful presentation in 3.5 minutes. It's a little funny because it's actually not framed just for eMargin. It's the Birmingham City University is interviewing their faculty, saying, what is it you do actually, and what's it good for? So those questions appear at the top of the talk in small print, and then he responds. Let me take you further. There's a discursive textual version of this that I recommend. You can find it just by keyword searching under Ariadne and eMargin. It's short, but it's very clear. What they say in brief is that for years we've been marking up books with our handwriting. When we go into the classroom, we frequently compare what we've written in the margins of our different books, and we learn something from that collaboration, and that's fine, but it's limited in what you can do, and you can now do better by bringing images of everybody's writing together. And the VLE connectivity key is that Moodle now will support this. It will support it with the help of Chris Scruton, who's sitting there looking at the screen, who was my go-to person last semester. There are some complexities in installing the program within your course. There are fewer complexities for students. I got no difficulty except a common complaint at the beginning: my browser won't get me there. And it turned out that Chrome was a preferred browser, but as the semester went on, other browsers were working fine, so, whatever. This is what the page looks like in a typical Moodle course. The E is a flag that will take you to a text. In this case, the introduction to the Turn of the Screw, chapters 1 and 2 of James's Turn of the Screw the next day. What I did with this is a Victorian course, and we were talking about a lot of things, but I wanted them to read something in sequence as published. This was serialized, and so we read chunks at a time. Some classes we discussed everything, others we actually kept to the syllabus and talked about that stuff, but in the background they were marking up their Henry James. This is what the surface of it looks like, with one annotator showing a comment. You can highlight with your mouse a passage, and you can just leave it highlighted if that's all you want to do. It's like a magic marker. Or you can click on the highlight and enter a comment. And I have a lot of comments in these files with students' names attached to them. So for FERPA reasons, I'm not showing you all those, but I'll show you one. My name is attached. Mrs. Gross's days blink across to where I pointed struck me as a sovereign sign that she too at last saw, the governess says in her self-deluding way. And I comment, of course, it could just as well be a sign of something else. I don't elaborate. It doesn't matter what I said. The point is you can say anything in this space. And if you're a student, you may well want to. In the case of the turn of the screw, what we found is that a lot of us were running interference against the governess's narrative, because it is, self-illusion in many ways, and students were very good at discovering how that was the case. You can also format it in this way so that the comments appear as clickable links at key passages. If you want to read the story in that format, then the comments are notes at the bottom. Here we are at the end of the story, and I don't want to give the plot away or anything, but the students were interested in the end of the story, and I have, let me just read you comments that they attached to some of these phrases, and then I'll refer you to Chris. Miles, he was at me in a white rage, bewildered, glaring vainly over the place, and missing wholly, though it now to my sense filled the room like the taste of poison, the wide, overwhelming presence. Student writes, the governess seems to interpret Miles' rage as a confirmation of his guilt, but his reaction reveals to the reader that until this moment he had no idea that the governess was seeing ghosts, let alone that she suspected him of conspiring with them. That's a nice comment, and it's good to give the space. Later, Peter Quint is the phrase highlighted there. After the governess drops Miss Jels's name, it wouldn't be too difficult for Miles to guess that his governess is talking about the ghost of his only other recently deceased caretaker. The name can hardly be considered proof. The governess is going after proof all the time. And the students are cross-checking on her. Peter Quint, you devil. Can we see that? Where is that going to be in here? There, yeah, a little blurry. Is he calling Quint a devil or the governess a devil? Not a dumb question. I mean, maybe not an important one, but it's a fair question for a reader on the run. And then I'll skip down to the bottom. The last word is stopped. His little heart, dispossessed, had stopped. The student writes, I'm sure we'll talk plenty about the ending, as we did in class, but I love how James manages to keep the ending of the story hidden until literally the very last word. It leaves something lacking in the way of a denouement, but it's a devastating way to finish. These are nice thoughts, which not every student would get to bring to the class floor in discussion, but which they can record easily as marking up their own book. So it's great software. Chris, you want to stand? And do you want to explain the difficulties and simplicities here?
Sure. Well, the initial setup was made via an external connection, external tool connection in Moodle. So if we just adding an activity and then selecting an external tool. The initial setup required copying and pasting several links pointing to the application server. There's a password, a link to the application's favicon and that sort of thing. What we were able to do by creating a site-wide connection via external tools is add eMargin as a menu item. So when you select external tools, and we've got a documentation packet here that will walk you through the process. But essentially what will happen is that any interested faculty member could add this to their course without having to copy and paste any of those long URLs into anything or remember passwords. The only thing that you would have to do if you wanted to include that sort of distinctive E favicon is copy that URL, and that doesn't, we're not able to set that up at a site level.
Yet.
And we are hoping actually to, with several of our external tools, this is the rest of my colleagues from the Moodle team, with several of the other external tools to set them up so there's not quite so much clicking that you have to do to set them up. Currently, you still have to click through into external tools and make a selection from that list.
Yeah.
We're hoping to sort of push those out into a easier to navigate selection list so it makes it a little more obvious to people that they're there. So as I mentioned, if anybody's interested, we have a packet of documentation here on how to set things up. with a little bit more about how to add text to your library of text that could be annotated.
Yes.
There's a little bit of trickiness in
Yeah.
setting that up.
Yes.
Michael, if you want to back up one more slide. In terms of, actually, if you go forward one or two.
No.
There we go. You can see the passages are numbered. And Michael, I believe you imported these as text files or as PDFs?
No, these are running text, plain TXT.
Yeah. So the system is keying on line breaks. And so if you're pulling things in as PDFs or documents that you have less control over the formatting, where you have less control over the formatting, you have a little less control over things like passage numbering and all that. So if you're teaching a poetry class and you really want people to be able to track the poem by line number and stanza and that sort of thing, you probably want to pull them in as text files and add some formatting yourself to make sure that eMargin sets them up correctly for you. I think you had a couple of issues with that.
Well, Goblin Market was one of our texts, and it was easy to have line-by-line numbering on the side. You remind me, though the techs who run this say that you can import a PDF file. That's true, but by PDF they mean a PDF of a Word file. I wanted to import 19th century pages in PDF, and they're not up to that yet.
It had to have sort of like was a text document of one sort.
Yes, exactly.
If you did page images, for example, like a lot of images you get from Reserve or Interlibrary Loan, they've been scanned as photographs, and they're not doing image or character recognition at this point.
There are other limitations. The students can't italicize or bold. I mean, what fun is that? You know, I mean, so I've asked them to add that. But they will gradually improve. What I will say is that, by the way, you alluded to the difficulty of loading the file. There's this three-step process, which the instructor will have to suffer. But it's all the instructor's problem. It's not the students. The students just take to it like that, and it's very, very fine.
Okay. And there are a couple of other features for students that are interesting in various other contexts. They can tag, and so you can do searches by tags.
Yes.
So that would allow them to create categories of responses and things.
Yeah,
like
there's
that.
color coding available, just like magic markers in one.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with it, and the guys who are running it are very responsive, and it was done locally, and they rolled it out. And before they went into the Moodle environment, the VLE environment, they had 500 institutions using the system, so they have got a good platform of users going, and now we can do it. And I do recommend it.
So we're from the LTMediaLab, the Learning Technologies Media Lab at the St. Paul campus. And my name's Nate Edwards. I'm a design developer there, and I do sort of specialize in mobile technology.
I'm Brad Hosack. I'm the lead designer at the Media Lab, and I kind of dabble in all the projects, including the one we're showing you today.
And so what we're going to be showing you guys is this really cool new project that we're working on, or it's new to release, in fact. It's called Flipgrid. And so the way that Flipgrid came about is we do some primarily just online courses, and we do a lot of hybrid courses, and a lot of them have to do with like design. And one of them that I'm teaching right now, 5362, it's the design and development of web-based learning environments. And what we found was that it's really hard for people to talk about design in a forum. You can see right now I'm talking about design, I'm using my hands, right? Or I would get closer to the, or I would find other ways of creating, sort of signifying how important something was to me. But how do you actually create that just based on text? So what we ended up coming up with was we tried to find a solution, right, that was engaging, that was able to capture emotion, and was able to sort of to be a catalyst for people to share. And we were trying to find a new way of doing that. So what we did initially is we started with the forums. We had forums, and like I said before, how do we capture what people are trying to say and communicate through their designs? How can we say that? How can we critique someone's design without seeing their body language and sort of working around that in some ways or another? And then also, how can we get really meaningful and authentic responses? If I'm talking to you about your design, it becomes much easier for me to create and craft a meaningful and authentic authentic response. But if I'm typing, if it's 7 a.m. and I'm sitting there and I've got my cup of coffee, it may say one thing. If it's 5 p.m. and it's the end of the day, it may be something else. And you really have this inauthentic sort of response that you end up creating. And that's on one end. And on the other end, you have really short responses that are, I agree, laugh out loud, smiley face, great answer. And really the person who's providing that feedback is what? I mean, they're really not providing really, authentic feedback that provides substance that the other person can work off of. And then on the flip side, we have people who, or in us included, where you will sit there and craft a response. You will make it as perfect as possible. And that's almost worse than just saying I agree or LOL. And we came across this great clip that sort of represents that.
Understand.
Nope.
Some of the words a little too sophisticated for that.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, of course it does. It's smart. I use the thesaurus. On every word? Yep.
Right. What was this sentence originally?
Oh, they are warm, nice people with big hearts. And that became, they are human prepossessing Homo sapiens with full-sized aortic pumps. Yeah, and hey, I really mean it, dude.
Right, Joey, I don't think we can use this.
Why not?
Well, because you signed it Baby Kangaroo Tribbiani.
So that's sort of, and that's one thing that we would come across, and then also we saw that really what we're trying to do is through design tell a story and then create communities, right? So it's hard to do that when you're just looking at type. If I see Brad on screen and I respond to him, then we have some kind of connection. I see his response, I see how he responds to something, and then he sees my response to him. And even if we're in a hybrid environment where we may only see each other once or twice, it allows us to have that connection once we actually do see each other, and sort of start off a conversation that we may not have had via like a forum or anything like that. And I'm not dogging on Moodle, guys, don't worry. It's a great service. So what we created was Flipgrid. We designed this in-house and developed it in-house. It's a space where students can go online, instructors can pose a question, students can go online, respond to that question, and then also respond to other students. So, and then the idea is then, when you go online, you can see other people's responses, you can like their response, you can share their response, and it provides a nice face-to-face opportunity that you wouldn't otherwise have, and it springboards conversation both online and in person. And then additionally, what it's doing is it's bringing people who may be uncomfortable in class. And this is really the amazing thing, is like you will see students who will not say a word in class, but then they get on Flipgrid and they don't have enough time to talk. It's just absolutely cool just seeing that. So we're going to demo Flipgrid really quickly here. So we're going to
switched services.
So we're going to pick a class, a PhD course from this fall, and whichever one.
Whichever one I want.
Yeah, go for
Okay, so this is Flipgrid, and you'll see here, these are a list of questions across here. This is a course from the previous semester. And then it has a bit of information about the class in general. So there's 12 questions across the semester that were added. How many videos have been played, the number of responses, so you can kind of get an idea of how many people are watching versus how many were recorded, and then how long since the last one was recorded. But then once you find a question you want to hear about, I'll go into the 5 years. In 5 years, what specific area of LT, or learning technologies, do you believe that you and your work will have the largest impact on? And then the students can come in and They can hear each other's responses. Oh, this is risky, isn't it?
Hi, everybody. I think that in 5 years, my work in LT is going to have...
You get the idea. And so once I go through and I watch them, I can see Fan here, she has 4 likes. If I want to, I can sort by which videos have the most likes. Hey, there's that guy. I think he hacked that. He's not the most liked. You can sort by date or just at random. You can even turn on a slideshow that'll take a full screen and just autoplay through all of them. But once you're ready, you can actually just record your own video and do that here. But I think what we're actually going to do is
Yeah, we're going to use the iPad here.
All right.
So with that, this summer we developed the iPad app. So now we can respond via the iPad, and this has actually been really fun for us to develop and see how people use it. So I'm going to respond to this question here, and in fact, let's take a picture. Very nice. Taking a picture of you guys. We'll upload it in 5 years. Oh man, that's a tough question. What do you think?
That's too far for me.
That is too far.
You answered it before.
I know. I don't
7 likes, I know.
So in 5 years, I think I will be working in mobile technology and location-based learning and evolving that field and adapting it to what I do in Ramble.
Oh.
So once that's done, I put in my name, I put in my email address, and if the instructor of the or the owner of this Flipgrid has it turned on, they get a notification once I submit my video. There we go.
Done. So if I go back here, here's my list of questions, and we'll see now the most recent one is, here's a picture of everybody here. So I see that Nate just responded. And so here's the video that he just recorded on the iPad.
So in 5 years, I think...
Oh, you covered the mic. Slacker. But you get the idea. So students can respond anywhere. And actually with the development of the app, the other thing that's been cool with that is now people are actually able to use the camera to actually talk about something off camera rather than just a talking head itself. We have students using it in like cooking classes, all sorts of different spaces. So this is the front end that people see. Just quickly, I'll flash to, this is what the instructor sees. So here's a list of the grids. Here's the 8350, the one we were just talking about. You can set up colors for it, privacy settings, that sort of thing. And then for all of my grids together, we also have a bunch of info about that, just in total. So as an example, in this account, over 7 hours of video has been recorded just in these 4 grids here. So just to give you an idea of that. So that, in a nutshell, is Flipgrid. And so far, we've had over 100,000 video responses in the past year. It's been in beta for the last year, and we only just now took it out of beta into public. And with those 100,000 plus video responses so far, it should also be known that there's 30,000, actually there's a few more than that now, but 30,000 accounts for instructors themselves. So with that, that's kind of what started driving the need for the mobile deployment. So right now there's the online and then the mobile, and we're growing it to, right now it's iPad only, but it'll be on the iPhone and hopefully the Android throughout 2014. Both of those will be coming as well. The browser version, the one you just saw, that's Flash-based, and that's because currently until, what's it called?
WebRTC.
Yeah, WebRTC catches up. There's currently no way to actually stream media the way that we're able to do it. So, for example, seeing him record and it instantly being in the environment online. In fact, even on a slow connection, while the video that you recorded is still writing to the server, people are already able to watch the beginning of it the way that Flash Media Server was implemented in a special way that we've kind of been working on. So we've not created an instantaneous or real-time response, but we've kind of created a space where people are able actually to engage as thoroughly as possible. So since the app came out in late November, 24th, 5th?
End of second week of November. Yep.
Yeah. there's been already over 5,000 app downloads, and about 30% of the videos that have been recorded have been on the app so far. So that was pretty encouraging. But like Nate was saying, and like the topic of today, we're born here at the university. We love Minnesota. And so our goal has been to grow it in a number of different ways, beyond just in the classroom. I'll touch on that in a moment. But so our recent partnerships are with the World Health Organization and then across 17 universities in the United Arab Emirates. And so that's kind of an exciting collaboration in those two areas that we're kind of trying to branch out in that way. But also in K-12, we just partnered with two of the larger districts in the United States, number 21 and number 12. And, you know, combined across them, that's 300,000 students, which is over triple the video responses we have currently. And, 24,000 teachers, so almost even double that as well. So we're really excited with these partnerships to see the server load implode here at the university. So it's pretty awesome. So some areas outside, though, that we're seeing the integration just with its current development is Boy and Girl Scouts, weddings. People are using it just kind of like as a video photo booth kind of a installation, and then it's cool because they can just share a link to it on Facebook or wherever, and everyone can watch all the responses. In churches, in marital therapy, and actually recently we partnered with a gynecology conference that we went and keynoted at, and they're actually using it in a lot of creative ways to create some unique interactions within their field, so that's pretty cool. And then we've actually already initiated a ton of research around this. Social presence, critical thinking. The stimulation of verbal discourse is actually my dissertation topic that I'm using the database to troll and mine and see what kind of things we can tease out as far as, you know, how you ask questions and how you can stimulate different types of responses. So that's pretty cool that we're already pushing so much in so many different directions with the research. But as we move forward with the new apps and then with some of the new projects that we have on the horizon coming out of a lot of the technology you're seeing here today, we focus on these principles in design, and that's the performance and the simplicity and the value and the intrigue, and together combined create an experience where the whole is obviously larger than the sum of them individually. So with that, everybody at the university, like I said, we love the UMN, and so if you went to flipgrid.com/UMN using your X500, you have a free account for as long as you're an instructor or staff here at the U. And one other quick point with the idea of Flipgrid is we've developed, I don't know if they're in place yet, but we've created like a Moodle block that should be, you guys are the Moodle guys. Hui? I think I was working with him on that. I'm not sure if, when, what, how, where things are at with that. But hopefully things like that are coming as well. But in addition, it's made to where you can just share a simple link to it, either to the grid, to a question exactly itself, or to even specific video responses. So that's kind of how folks are using it right now. So, and it looks like we're going to do questions at the end of this, right? So,
thanks. My name is Tommy Nelson. I am a researcher and lecturer in the School of Physics and Astronomy. And Justin asked me to speak to you today because we've been thinking a lot about the use of digital technology within our own classrooms over in CSE. And in particular, a project that I'm involved in and that Lucy Fortson is the principal investigator of here at the University of Minnesota is Galaxy Zoo and related projects encompassed by this term, the Zooniverse. This is basically a citizen science initiative that I'll explain a little bit more about in a second. But what we are very interested in right now is the ways in which we can use this type of project in the framework of an inquiry-based curriculum in an introductory science course to try and really increase the engagement of our student population in science by taking part in it. I just want to also point out Kyle Willett, who's another postdoc over in astronomy, who's very involved in the science side of this project. And if you have any questions about the ins and outs of how this actually works, he's a great local resource to go talk to. So the Zooniverse is kind of a weird word, and I think it has a fun, colorful story that probably involves a lot of alcohol, knowing the Oxford contingency of the project. But basically, what we refer to as the Zooniverse is now a pretty extensive suite of citizen science projects, all hosted within this web environment that we call zooniverse.org. The subject areas of the projects now are really quite diverse, although it started as a primarily astronomy-focused endeavor. We now have projects going on in the biological sciences and zoology, in the humanities, one of which I'll highlight today, in climate science. And really, I think the take-home message is if you have a project where the classification or, I've just forgotten the word, transcription capabilities of a large number of people would be useful, then the Zooniverse platform is potentially something that you should look into. So rather than show lots of boring PowerPoints, really the easiest way to talk about the Zooniverse is just to look at it online. So if you go to zooniverse.org, this will take you to the kind of homepage of all projects and allow you to get a sense of the types of things that the organization is working on right now. So obviously we started off with space-based projects. Even those are really quite different now compared to the original Galaxy Zoo. Right now you can look at pictures of the moon to characterize craters. You can study solar activity from data from the SOHO and other solar satellites. You can look at data from Kepler, which has been a really remarkable NASA mission that's trying to find planets around other stars. And I think that's one place where the people involved, the public involved in Zooniverse have really shone and made a massive contribution. They've really discovered a pretty significant number of planet candidates now through their engagement with this website. And then we have some more recent things like examining pictures of Mars to try and understand Martian weather, looking for star clusters in nearby galaxies. And if you like beautiful pictures, these projects are actually really wonderful, although I don't have time to show you them all today. We have this ongoing climate-related project called Old Weather, which was really our first effort at transcription, and it has really kind of created a buzz amongst its core group of users who are now very committed to looking at these old weather records and you know, tracking not just what the climate's been doing, but also what people have been doing through these shipping records, and a lot of really interesting engagement online with users around some of the other material that they're being presented besides just the weather data. In terms of the humanities, which hopefully a lot of people in this room are more interested in, we have this ongoing project that has is being led here at Minnesota in collaboration with people at Oxford, Ancient Lives, where people are actually transcribing ancient Greek papyri. But more recently, some other projects have started up. One that I'm going to show you today, War Diary, which is really interesting. And we're all going to be trying it together because I have not actually tried it out yet. I thought that would be a more honest way to do that. Lots of nice biology stuff. Snapshot Serengeti you've probably heard of. That's a Minnesota-based project, has been hugely successful. I'll show you some of that too. And then it just kind of keeps going on. Right now people are watching worms lay eggs, which apparently they like because people are doing it. So I thought we'd just start with the original, and astronomers would say best, Galaxy Zoo Citizen Science Project, which was the Galaxy Zoo. And this kind of basically started everything off, right? With the advent of these large sky survey telescopes, the amount of data that astronomers had to actually look at just became impossible for individuals to do by themselves. And in particular, things like classifying the shape of a galaxy are particularly difficult to automate. The machine learning algorithms just really have not gotten to the same place as a human's pair of eyes when it comes to deciding whether a galaxy has 3 spiral arms or 4 spiral arms, or is spheroid or cigar-shaped bulge, you know. So this kind of kicked it all off. And what we do in this website is basically show you a series of pictures. This one's not very bright, so maybe I'll refresh and get a better one. Okay, that's a bit easier to see. We present you with a picture of a galaxy taken directly from the sky survey, and then we just ask you to answer these questions to determine, you know, is it smooth or does it have features? In this case, I would probably go with smooth. This one is actually quite rounded, okay, so we'll go with completely round. In other places, you would definitely see a more cigar-shaped object. And then we ask you to say if there's anything odd nearby. I would say with this particular galaxy there isn't, but in some cases there might be a star or an artifact in the image which you can flag. Here's another one. And you basically just keep going through this over and over. And as boring as this might seem in the middle of a talk, people love doing this. And actually, these are not the most exciting images. When you land on a beautiful, detailed, well-resolved spiral galaxy, you kind of feel like you've won a prize because a lot of the time you're looking at smudgy things. So people really love this. And that created enough of a community that we actually had a set of people to go off and do these other projects. As I said, there have been many now. I want to focus on Snapshot Serengeti for two reasons. It is a Minnesota project, but also these images are fantastic. And I have to say, as an astronomer, I much prefer looking at zebra than galaxies these days. I think these are much more fun. So in this case, what we're having you do is look for animals in the picture and then identify what species they are and tell us anything else you see. So I don't know if you can tell here, but there's actually a family of zebra in the background here. So you go over here and you pick zebra, and it will show you a nice picture of a zebra just to verify that that's actually what you're looking at. And here we're seeing a bunch of them. I can't really tell, but for sure I can see probably 4. So I would click 4, and they are standing. They don't seem to be running, and I can't really tell if they're eating. So this one, oh yes, and they are actually moving. Okay, so I should change it, right? I forgot about that. So I will take that back. So the images are captured in groups of 3 or 2, depending on the setup of the camera, and they are motion triggered, right? So an animal has to come within, or a waving tree, or something has to move in the vicinity of the camera. And so this is basically what you do, and then you would go on to the next one. Oh, and look, another zebra. That's awesome. Okay, so in this case, you can see that the camera was probably actually triggered by the grass moving rather than the zebra itself, which seems to be just standing here. So, you know, this is kind of two extremes, but the thing that we have right here is this amazing ability to engage people because we're showing them beautiful pictures. And if you're into animals or galaxies or fish or geology or old maps or old papyri, there's a project for you, and it will actually capture your attention for quite a while. Our average user stays on the website for 10 to 20 minutes at a time, which is really quite amazing. This is a new project that's just launched, and this is the one that I have not yet tried, so I thought we'd just have a quick look at it. But basically, we've taken these old war diaries that, if I get this right, these are actually from squadron leaders. Yeah, from the Western Front. Yeah, from the Western Front, who recorded the actions and things that their troops and their battalions were up to during this time. And so we will show you these pages, and what we want people to do is to actually go in and transcribe information from the pages themselves. So this has asked me to select the diary page from the page types menu, so I'll just click on it here. And then you have to decide what time of, if you've decided what type of page it is, then you can tag all the things that you see on here. So it will say that they mostly use a pre-printed template that gives you some information about what you're looking at. The first thing it will have you do is look for the date. And so this is the 20th of May, although I can't actually tell what year. 1915. Oh yeah, there you go. It tells you right here. Okay. So anyway, normally you'd actually have to find that information from the page of the diary you're being shown. And once you've done that, you click on the tick button, which is on the page, probably at the bottom. I can't see it. Where is it? I've done this. Well, anyway, I won't keep boring you with this, but just to give you a sense of what you're actually looking at. You can see why this is a difficult problem, because old cursive is very difficult for automated text parsers to actually lift off the page, okay? I encourage you to go play with this. It's certainly something that I will do after this talk now, so I can finish it. Do you see it? Is it? Yeah.
Not quite, no.
Anyway, it's okay.
When you do the tutorial without being in the middle of a talk,
Yes, it's usually easier. And if I hadn't come straight from lab, I would have done this before the talk. But anyway. Okay, so that gives you a kind of sense of the range of projects that we're doing. Now, this is all well and good for members of the public who want to go off and try these projects, but we are interested in what educational value these projects might have, you know, as people at a university. There has been some research and development already within the Zooniverse project for the use of these types of activities, but mainly focusing at this point on K through 12 education. So right now we have a special part of the website called Navigator built into Galaxy Zoo that can actually take a classroom's own classifications of these galaxies and then allow some basic manipulation of the properties of those galaxies within a kind of statistical tool web page, so that students can look at the distribution, for instance, of the redshift of the galaxy, which is basically how far away they are, or create a scatter graph telling you the size of the galaxy versus its brightness in a red filter. This is great, and actually a large number of activities have been developed, I can go back to this, through using the Galaxy Zoo website just kind of as it is by teachers, and these are being collected on a part of the Zooniverse website called Zoo Teach. So you could go here, you can click on a subject, sciences or mathematics or humanities, and you will find documents that have been created by teachers in high schools or even college teachers with ideas for activities that you can use to build some component of your curriculum around these web-based citizen science projects. These are really great to explore, but I would say, certainly as someone who's teaching intro astronomy here, that by itself, the Zooniverse can't do everything that I would like it to be able to do in my classroom, although it can do a lot. Snapshot Serengeti, for example, has been used quite extensively in the zoology department here in their introductory courses, and it's been very successful. Their focus is on classifications and also on questions basically about what the animals are doing within the pictures. I would say that in the biological sciences, the task that users are doing on the website is in some ways more closely tied to the types of tasks that professional scientists are actually doing. The classification is really not any different when you're deciding if a zebra's in a picture, if you are an undergraduate student or a member of the public or a professional zoologist working with their own data set. In astronomy, the classification task by itself, although very interesting and useful to include in the class, is actually not everything that we could potentially do with the Galaxy Zoo platform. I've used the website as it is with classification activities in the classroom, but I think there's a lot more scope to do more. And for instance, Navigator needs to be expanded in certain ways to input more complex statistical tools and graphing capabilities to do the types of tasks that are appropriate for a college classroom as opposed to a high school classroom. So we've been thinking about the next steps that we need for this platform to make it more suitable for the introductory astronomy classroom. And there are actually some very interesting case studies from Galaxy Zoo itself that have nothing to do with the university or a classroom. People have become so engaged with the Zooniverse website and with the Galaxy Zoo project that they've actually made their own discoveries and have kind of demonstrated all the types of behaviors that we'd like to see in undergraduate science students just by themselves because it was fun. A really good example is this object called Hanny's Voorwerp, which is called Hanny's Voorwerp because it was a woman called Hanny who was a member of the Zooniverse community, very engaged in the forums. She found this neat picture. It's the green fuzzy blob near a galaxy, which actually turned out to be an old relic of an outflow from the black hole at the center of that galaxy. Completely serendipitous discovery, not part of the original task, but the community rallied around it, and it actually ended up being published in a professional astronomy journal. Likewise with these green peas, very small, compact green galaxies that users noticed in the images and thought, these are cool, what are they? Developed a community of people who thought it was kind of a badge of honor to find one, but went that extra step and actually discovered by themselves what these objects were, how to find them in the data, then how to go off of the Galaxy Zoo website and find more of them in other astronomy catalogs. all by themselves, all without the intervention of a professional astronomer, until they brought the result to the attention of one of the postdocs in the project and said, we found these amazingly high star formation rate galaxies. And we were all like, what? How did this happen? But they went off and did it by themselves. So that really has encouraged us to try and get the users to do more, and I think this is where we're starting to transition to what we can do in the classroom. Galaxy Zoo Quench is a live project right now where we're actually working with a group of several hundred Galaxy Zoo users to do a new, authentic, real research project from scratch, and this is being led by a colleague of mine, Laura Truey, at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. And the users are actually going online and having quite extensive interactions with not just the images of Galaxy Zoo, but all of the Galaxy Zoo data for those galaxies that exist in larger astronomy catalogs in the background. I just have a slide or two to go, Justin. So these galaxies were specially selected because they probably have an interesting black hole at their center. And these Galaxy Zoo users have been studying them, you know, just as astronomers would, and having quite extensive conversations on the online forums about them, asking questions, finding similar objects, and even going as far as carrying out more advanced mathematical and statistical analyses of the data sets using tools that at this point are kind of still in development, but are enabling real science to be done. And that's what we want to try and replicate in the classroom as these tools become more advanced. And so we're actually about 2 days away from submitting an NSF collaborative proposal with the Adler and astronomy faculty at Northwestern University in Chicago, where we're going to build on this Galaxy Zoo Quench experience and give students in the introductory astronomy classroom, so remember that these are non-majors, most of the students are actually CLA majors, we're going to give them an authentic research experience, one that's very scaffolded, of course, by the staff, but one that nonetheless, hopefully, will give them the opportunity to explore the data in a really realistic way, you know, the way that professional astronomers do, by getting in there, digging around in it, looking to see what the data tell them, and then thinking about how that can be applied to a question that they ask. And so we've asked for funding from the NSF to develop these tools and the curricular materials that we would need around them to scaffold that experience, introduce them to some of the basic concepts of research, and hopefully provide them with an experience by the end of the semester that they can actually say, yeah, that's kind of like what a real astronomer does. And although this is a reasonably young field of inquiry in science education, there is evidence from education scholars that having these types of authentic research experiences in the classroom can improve retention for STEM majors, which is at kind of an all-time low, but also attitudes about science and scientific literacy. You know, working towards this larger goal of creating a more scientifically literate and aware community. And it doesn't just do that for kind of normal, you know, white students from the suburbs, but can actually do it for female students, for students of color, from students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and for students with special needs. So this is a potentially very powerful way to kind of build up that experience for every student in our introductory science class. And if we get this funded and can show that it works in astronomy, there's no reason why this couldn't be expanded to other fields in science too, and potentially right to humanities when you have the capability to let students dig into real primary sources like these war records. So it's a kind of more of an advertisement for what we're up to right now, but I hope you watch this space. And the thing that I want to leave you with is that we would love to hear your ideas. A big push for Zooniverse right now is to make the platform so easy to use that we can turn out projects much more quickly with less intervention from the programmers at the Adler Planetarium, because this is a kind of build your own project. I've already talked to Justin about this, and I know that there are lots of interesting projects right here at the University of Minnesota, lots of archives and resources. So if you think you have something that could benefit from one of these citizen engagements online, talk to us. Thanks. That's it.
So I'm Ilene Alexander. I am at the Center for Teaching and Learning Services. I was in the English department before that, where I taught literature and upper level writing courses, and before that I taught women's studies, sexuality studies, American studies courses, and I've always taught writing courses for first-year students, still do that, and I have always mentored TAs and teachers. I've never not done that, and I've never not had a mentor or a TA. So when Justin asked, or had a mentor or been a mentor. So I'm gonna do something in this room because one of my, what I picked as a tool was this room, rooms like this, to think about. So if you'd come in here and this was a course I was teaching or a whole session, you would have found on the whiteboards a question. I'm gonna ask you to show hands anyway instead. You would have seen 4 questions, and I'll just do the 4 and then we'll do the showing of hands. One would be, have you taught in rooms like this? One would be, have you taught online, whether it's hybrid or fully? One would be, what do you know about MOOCs? And I would divide it into Coursera and non-Coursera MOOCs. And the other would be, what's one tool that you love to use? So just to help me a little bit, how many of you have taught in a room like this? Any? Yeah, about a third of us. Okay, how many of you have taught online or hybrid, doesn't matter? Okay, that helps me some here. And how many of you have done a Coursera-like MOOC? A few. Any of you done non-Coursera MOOCs? The X-MOOCs are the Coursera ones, they're PNC MOOCs. I helped design Coursera MOOCs, and I will say this, I don't like them. I help design other MOOCs, and I take them and I love them. So I'm not against MOOCs, but that fits into what I'm going to say here. So I think the most important thing as a tool is the room itself and the space. So I think a lot about how I mash these things up. I have this room, but I also have the space of online. I also have my students' lives outside of the classroom and the work they do. So right there, this room isn't all that we have as a tool. It's where they live. It's what they're doing online. So there's a sort of tool set of things there. And so I think of mashing these up, how they fit together. I also think about spring, as you can tell by the pictures, which are from my own backyard, Wales, and another place in Wales, northern Wales and southern Wales. Partly, again, a lot of what I'm thinking about comes from the UK, like eMargin started its life, I think, with JISC in the UK. So when we think of tools and tools we use, I encourage people to think outside of the US. They're way ahead of us in the European Union. So another piece I want you to think about is the change-up that all of these tools get us thinking about. One of the reasons I don't like XMOOCs, the Coursera ones, is they still look like that image on the left. There's someone talking at us. And we're doing something maybe in forums, but in my animated version, you can see that people are talking to each other. Some of them are sleeping. Some of them look like they're making dates, the way they're looking at each other. So, you know, all that activity is going on. So you can do the tools, but is that same behavior going to happen? So you need to change things up. So I like to remind people of Rod Carew, who's down in the bottom corner. And I grew up with Rod Carew playing baseball for the Twins. And I love Rod Carew, and Paul Buckler knows this, that I love Rod Carew because he is a contact zone hitter. So some of you who watch the Twins, know that a contact zone hitter watches the ball, watches the players, watches the score, watches the coach, watches everything except the perfect zone for making contact. That kind of play in there. But they care about everything else that goes on. So the students' lives, the climate of the classroom, the climate beyond the classroom, all kinds of things. So I think inverted. How do we invert things? And the change-ups to use any of these tools require, you could just think about how you're putting a lecture together differently, but that might go somewhere else. But if I'm using Flipgrid and I'm doing a lecture, maybe I'm going to actually do my lecture in class and have students do some reading about it and say, what's the first question you need answered after this reading? And they all go look at each other's and they nominate the questions that are going to inform me for the lecture. And I can do something. So I've done some inverting. So I've thought about the tool, but I've also thought about the pedagogy. So that's my other tool. When Justin asked me to do this, I thought, okay, I have to huckster for pedagogy because that's what I do. And so the flip can sometimes break apart. This is the first time I tried to make Welsh cakes, which are really savory and tasty. Think of Russian tea cakes or Mexican wedding cakes, only flat and with currants in them. And they fall apart, they break apart, but you know, they mostly turned out. It's not going to work the first time you do this stuff and you try out the tools. The first time we used Flipgrid, it was in beta, and students got really frustrated having to add their emails all the time and those kinds of things. So I had to think about how I would entice them into using that, even though they had to do that all the time. The first time I used Goodreader, which is what I used instead of eMargin, students didn't like having lots of noise, hearing other people's comments. So we had to figure out how to make that not noise. But that was pedagogical. Oh, I make it not noise by smaller groups. Oh, groups are really important to how I use the tools and where students use the tools. So again, that inverted my thinking. I wasn't just flipping where they do the reading, how they do the reading, who's lecturing. I had to think about audiences in a whole new way. So if you're using Flipgrid, who's the audience for that? Is a really important question. If you're using eMargin, who's the audience for that? Can they take the eMargin away and use it later when they leave your classroom? Or is that really hard to do? Which is why I've used Goodreader, because they can take it away. I never have to see it. They can exclude me from their small groups when they're doing shared readings. They can say, don't want you. Or they can let me in by sharing it with me. Lots of things change when you're thinking about the tool, and if the tool is this room, how do you get people to participate? Notice we all stood there, but the screens are all over there. Again, how do you move around in a room like this? How is the tool? What kinds of things can you get to get people to move? You probably have talked to people at your tables and participated there a little bit. What about the people behind you at the tables? So if you're doing something on Flipgrid with one question and you're doing something with Flipgrid on another question, what if I just have whole tables move and see each other's, from their computers? You've already gotten your questions up. Is it okay? And you're looking at them for someone else to look at them. Just little things. And what happens then if they record a different answer? But again, by moving around the room and using the room as your tool, what can you do? Even online. So the U loves its collaborative active learning spaces and loves online and loves the tools. But I just feel like I need to remind people it can happen anywhere. So, there's STSS up at the top. That picture in the middle, the bigger one, is my students in a conference room. We just I only wanted tables and screens. The two most important tools I can think of: tables, screens, and big whiteboards or Post-its if you don't have whiteboards. I carry Post-its when I don't teach in this room, those big ones that have a handle. And that was my online students, an example at the bottom one, of my online students talking to my face-to-face students, talking to my students who were Skyping into class. And we had 3 different locations where we were working with in one class session. So again, tool, what's your tool? Well, that one was Skype. It was the only one that would work. Hangout wasn't working for us that night. Connect wasn't working for us that night. So again, we had a tool in mind. They didn't work. We had to come up with something. One of my other tools when I think about teaching with technology is the group. And lots of us know this thing: forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, that model. I hate it. And I don't like that people call groups, everything is a group. There are groups and teams for me. Groups are ad hoc and informal, and if I'm thinking about a tool, who's using it? An informal group, and do they all need to get access to it, or a formal team that might be able to ramp up and use it? Flipgrid is great for an informal groups. eMargin and Goodreader are great for organized teams that actually care about things. So we've changed this. My students changed this last semester. Instead of form, storm, norm, perform, they again inverted our thinking about tools. What's the context? We're coming together as a team. What tools are we going to need in this context? What are we doing? What tools can help us make judgments and discern what our ideas are? How can we get more ideas by using a tool? So here's where we're going to join into some blogs as our tool. Here's where we're going to see what people say in the responses. Now, what are we going to create to get our ideas out instead of norming? We don't want to be like everybody else. We want to create things. We want to show how our brains work. But then we have to have a real audience and test them. We're not just performing for the teacher. That's the nice thing about these tools we're picking. You can go somewhere else and perform to lots of other audiences. And then you get to reflect and conclude, and you can keep doing that over and over. So thinking of the room as a tool is what made my students rework all of this. And I'm going to skip over some slides here. And Justin has the URL for this. I will tell you where you can find it too. That's there. So I just want to add a couple of things about thinking of the room as a tool and using all the tools is you have to think about pedagogy, you have to think about people, and you have to think about purpose. It's great to have a really great tool to use. And there are things I love with technology that I would never use in the classroom because it doesn't fit the pedagogy or how I know the brain works. It doesn't work with the people in my class who've got to go do something. So when I'm teaching in this room for preparing future faculty, I first of all have to get people used to all these kiosks, their tools. But Google Suite is where we start. Is that the tool? Is that the best tool? I have to think about that. And the purpose is for them to create documents, learn how to teach, get comfortable in a room like this, give each other feedback. That's how we've used Flipgrid, is for feedback when I teach graduate students, or they practice how they're going to introduce the first minute of class and have each other hear it, because that first minute really matters. And one of the things I will close with here in thinking about tools is lots of people think that students know a lot about the tools that are out there to use, and that we who are teachers don't know much. I like to remind my students that in 1990 I did the first blog I ever did. And you had to get on one at a time on a Gandalf box to enter it or read it. But it was a blog, and the whole class did it. So I'm not an immigrant, and I'm not someone who doesn't know how to use it. I'm not a digital know-nothing. So with people in the UK at Oxford Brookes, they've got us thinking about when we pick tools, when we think about it, who are the skilled orienteers in your class? Who's going to know how to use the tool? And what kinds of questions are those liminal participants, the ones who don't quite get the course or the tool? What kinds of questions are they going to have? And pick your tools anticipating how one group can help the other group. And what are you going to do to make that happen? So the liminal participant almost gets it, and the skilled orienteer as a way to think about and evaluate and assess the kinds of tools that you use. And all of this goes to, again, course design is my other tool, if I have to say it. What's the atmosphere? Where are you at? What's the big cultural thing? What's going on in your classroom? So I think of culture and classroom for atmosphere. And what are the aims, the outcomes? What are the activities? What are the assessments? John Biggs and Catherine Tang really rock in their 4th edition talking about this in a book. But it's the 4 A's, and that's how I make decisions about the tools that I use. And one of the tools, I just want to say, because I've mentioned the other two, we're looking at Zooniverse because we're trying to put together an archive of people who've done active learning in social justice or citizen education movements back to the 1770s. Because as people in the humanities, we don't want people who are doing science and getting funded for it to not have the history of all the richness that's behind it. And the current conversation is, look what science discovered, and I always want to say, not so much. But we're all making it better. So the tools are the rooms and what you know about learning and how you think about pedagogy. So now it's time for questions, and I talk fast, so we have more.